All right, it's time for season 3 power rankings. I don't have a plan going into this, very unscripted, kind of like last season. So we're going to start off with the East Austin Septiles now, not Archeos, but the Septiles. So if I pull up their thing here, I am very impressed by the rapid shift in, I think, team building expertise for VGC from Chow. I think that this team is significantly better than the team from last season. So I really I do expect this team to perform extremely well, especially in comparison. Like I think we may see some Chow wins this season. But to get the obvious out of the way, we got Rain, which with Regieleki can run Thunder. Pelipper also offers Tailwind and Wide Guard, which are great support for potentially things like, you know, Garchomp could use Tailwind eventually. Porygon Z especially is a big abuser of Tailwind here. Monkey Dory can in certain situations if the opponent's team is really fast. Gardevoir can, maybe even run like a choice spec set with some Tailwind support. But really, this Wide Guard is amazing for blocking Earthquake, which hits Alecki, it hits Dreadnought, it hits Skeledirge, it hits Reverum, hits Monkey Dory and Overquill. And so, like, this team is very ground weak. But if you don't have single target ground damage, Pelipper stops Earthquake. So you kind of need to get rid of it first, which can make it very difficult. And another thing is that, like, Dreadnought and Pelipper are both very good into the ground types to begin with, which can make it very difficult for opposing ground type Pokemon to get going, because, like, he can just lead Pelipper Dreadnought, get a Swift Swim boost, outspeed your ground type, click Earthquake, and be fine. On the downside, however, I do think he is susceptible to his own Earthquake. I think Garchomp can run Stomping Tantrum pretty effectively. I know it doesn't get high horsepower, but I do like it in general. I think it's a very strong mon, and I do think that he can lead it next to Pelipper and be fine. Yeah, because then you really get, like, flying. What you're really using Pelipper there is not only just a ground immunity for Earthquake spam, but also for the strong Hurricanes that are 100% accurate now. And that next to Garchomp is very, very strong because it hits the bug and grass types that would have resisted Garchomp's Earthquakes, if that decides to come into fruition. Gardevoir, also worth noting with Telepathy, does avoid the Earthquakes as well. But then Swift Swim with Overquill and Dreadnought, obviously abusable. And yeah, so those are most of the synergies that I see off the bat. However, on an individual level, Pelipper is pretty strong. It has a wide array of support moves and is really good. Regieleki, I love Regieleki. I think this season teams are a lot slower. I think Regieleki's very fast. I think the general trend this season seems to be bulkier and slower, except barring some teams like Matt's, but we'll get to that. And because of that, I think it's very, very strong to have a base speed, like a Pokemon with a really high base speed, because a lot of teams, even with, like, Choice Scarf, can't consistently outspeed Regieleki, even modest Regieleki. So I do expect to see some, like, Regieleki next to Pelipper with, like, Thunder Regieleki, like, Helping Hand boosted, even though Transistor got nerfed this gen. Maybe even, like, Terra Electric or Terra Ice stuff, like he liked doing with Electrode. Then maybe why he got Electrode, because it's just better Electrode from him last season. I do think this is going to be really good. Garchomp, I've already talked about. I think it gets Breaking Swipe now, which is better. But yeah, so I mean, really don't want to be clicking Earthquake with it, but Stomping Tantrum's okay. Monkey Dory, I think this is one of the better mons in draft. I know that Frisk, Fake Out, specifically with high speed and high special attack, is very strong. And I think that that will do hopefully a lot for his information game. Because really, this is an information gathering Pokemon, and I do think that's very valuable. Overquill is great. I mean, Pelipper Overquill. That's just a good solid part of Twim's team last season, and I think that that works really well because I think having the option to run it outside of rain with Intimidate or inside of rain with Swift Swim as like a sweeper, both are very good, and I do like the versatility of this mod. Porygon Z, I'm okay with Porygon Z. I think it's cool. I don't think it's the greatest mod in draft. I don't think it is very diverse, but it did get what's it called? Stellar Terra this generation or this DLC, which enables it to do a lot more since it can hit Terra Pokemon really hard. And I do think with the adaptability, that Porygon Z is a very, very strong Stellar Terra abuser and a very strong, very strong normal type, very strong special attacker in general. It lacked the coverage before, I guess, and now it has a niche, and I do think it's okay. I think it's a bit expensive for what it does, but I think it's very strong on this team just because it hits on the special end, which not every Pokemon on this team does, right? So you got Garchomp and Overquill, and Dreadnought. So I think it's just a solid offensive piece. Dreadnought, like I said, to kind of handle the ground types that maybe Overquill wouldn't want to. So you get double Swift Swim here, which is very nice. I do think this is just like one of the fastest teams in the league right now, which is great. And yeah, so I think Dreadnought, with Strong Jaw is very strong, but I think with Swift Swim is a little bit weaker. Because if we look here, it's 115 base attack, which isn't the highest, but it's also not super low. So I do expect it to see some use, and I expect it to do some cool things, but I really don't expect it to be picking up like major KOs like I do Porygon Z or Garchomp or Regieleki or even Monkey Dory maybe. Skeledirge is going to be very strong if he gets into that Torch Song mindset, that sort of setup with some slack off maybe. It having Encore is a big deal too, which I found out relatively recently. And yeah, this Will-O-Wisp Unaware is crazy on it because it has such high base stats to begin with. Or I mean, not such high base stats, but like such a good distribution of them for a starter Pokemon that makes it really quite bulky, and you can't set up to get over that, which makes it strong. And I do like the Torch Song stuff, and I think Torch Song's Throat Spay is good. I think maybe some Sing shenanigans. There's a whole bunch of things. Revavroom. I do like Revavroom. I think it's a solid steel and poison type for the price. Very weak to ground, of course, but a lot of the team is. And I mean, it gets swagger. It gets some interesting stuff. Yeah, it's really just kind of an offensive piece. It gets Haze, which is convenient, and Taunt, but that's pretty much it. It's mainly, I mean, it gets Shift Gear for like, it's kind of a setup mod. Because again, kind of like Dreadnought, this was actually a little bit better because it's got 119, but overall, with base 90 speed and only Pelipper Tailwind to support it if it wants to go faster, outside of that Shift Gear, I do think it requires that setup to really function well as an offensive Pokemon. And for that reason, I don't think it's the best. I don't think it can hit the ground running like a lot of other Pokemon, but I also don't think it's bad. So I think it's a good pickup overall. And Gardevoir is good. Matt often compares it to a mini Fluttermane. I disagree. I don't think it's anything like Fluttermane. I think it's much more supportive. I do think it is a primarily specially defensive fairy type, kind of like Fluttermane. The stat spreads aren't too far off, but they really do different things. Like Gardevoir's entire moveset is so diverse and has so many options, and I really do think it's just a very strong supportive mon. And like I said, it can run like choice spec sets or life orb sets, and it can do damage. I just don't think you're going to be running it like fast, like booster speed Flutter likes to, or Choice Specs Flutter likes to very often, because it's just difficult with its base speed to get going like that. And I think it can certainly work against some teams. Like, I know there are a lot of slow teams this season, so I think maybe Gardevoir can outspeed some teams and deal some big damage, but I think primarily you're going to leave your psychic attacks to Monkey Dory. You might have some Moon Blasts on here, but otherwise you're going to have your Trick Rooms, your Imprisons, your, even Encores. Light Screens Reflect, maybe. Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Thunderwave, Helping Hand. I can see all of those coming. So yeah. But overall, I think Garchomp is a bit of an anti-synergy with everything. But I do think that all in all, it is quite a strong team, and I think it's a lot better than last season. I think this is a VGC team. I think last season was a singles team, and I'm liking this progression. I have a lot of faith in our MVP or most valuable coach from last season, and I expect some wins. So going back to this, I think just because of the common weaknesses here, because there are so many ground type weaknesses, Ghost, isn't resisted by much, and Dark as well. But then overall, I mean, outside of this horrible ground matchup, I think that the rest is pretty good. I just think that this Garchomp kind of hurts more than it helps in some ways. And so for that reason, I think I'm going to have to put it in between A and B. I think it's high B, low A. But we will see. I'll put it in B for now. The Delmise, another team that I think really stepped up the team building here and this season compared to last. Now, some things I do think. I do think that this team has a lot of frail Pokemon that are somewhat fast. I don't think it's a fast team. I don't think it's a fast team like I did the East Austin Sceptiles, which, by the way, stole that mascot, which is absurd. But I love Magmar. I think Bulky Follow Me with Flame Body is very strong. I think Taunt is very strong. Gets Helping Hand, gets Will-O-Wisp. Raichu, it gets this Lightning Rod to cover for anything that, Rapid Strike or Shifu might be suffering with as far as the electric types go. So like Magmar being able to redirect grass types, Raichu being able to redirect not lightning types, electric types, and then also being able to potentially take out flying types. I think that these two do an incredible job keeping Urshifu Rapid Strike safe, and I think that Scrafty's could intimidate for the whole team. I think Sylveon and Archaludon together, Archaludon, I don't know. I think together they kind of form a fantasy core, or if you count Klefki, like the strong fantasy core stuff here. And then we got Fire, Water, Grass with the Magmar, Urshifu, and Sceptile, which I think can be strong as well. Not really as much offensive pressure immediately coming out from either Sceptile or Magmar. Sceptile can run some cool stuff. Like I would be hype. I'd pop off if we got to see like some Frenzy Plant Sceptile stuff maybe one day, or an offensive Magmar set. But I do doubt it with Magmar, because I do think Magmar's pretty locked into Eviolite, which does make it susceptible to knockoff. However, it's really bulky with the Eviolite, so I think it's a worthwhile trade-off, especially since nothing else on the team requires Eviolite. I do not really know what Dodrio does. I know it's fast. I know it gets Tailwind. And I guess Haze and Taunt and Helping Hand. I don't really see what this does other than maybe being like an okay 110 attack Brave Bird or something. Which, it's okay. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a low point mon, and I think that it was drafted primarily just to fill out the rest of the team after using points in better places. So I think overall though, Archaludon with screens, I think that's good. I think Rapid Striker Shifu with Klefki's Rain is also very good. I think that Sceptile being able to give Arcaliudon or anything that terrestrializes Dragon um, some boosts, because Sceptile actually got pretty buffed this gen because it gets Dragon Tier now. It gets I think Breaking Swipe now. I know it gets Shed Tail now, which is absurd. So you can probably safely pivot something in. So maybe Dodrio behind a sub. Uh, and of course, it has some decent special attack. It's not like great, but it has strong moves like Frenzy Plant or Leaf Storm. So like I wouldn't be surprised to see a Leaf Storm, um, maybe like a Leaf Storm eject pack set or something. Sylveon, my pride and joy. I made this evolution work all of last season, and I can't really say much other than I think it's just a very consistent fairy type attacker. I think it can be bulky. I think it struggles on the physical defense side. Um, so if you do face a team that has a lot of physical mons, I do think that you need to heavily invest into defense. It's actually way better to invest like purely into defense than it is to invest in even the HP. Just because the difference in the defense and special defense here is so great, you really want to raise these lower stats. And so Sylveon's just consistent. And so overall, I think the team type-wise, I think very synergistically with kind of carrying some of the two main Pokemon that I really see working, and then Sylveon is pretty good on its own or whatever you need to bring it. But supporting Urshifu, Magmar, and Raichu are great at, and supporting Arcaliudon, Klefki is great at as well. I think both of these Pokemon benefit from Rain. I think that's great. Yeah, so that's kind of where I sit synergistically. I like Scrafty's Fake Out. I think Scrafty gets a lot of cool little techs. I think that having Knockoff, having Snarl, having Fake Out, um, Taunt, does it get Helping Hand? Yeah, it gets Helping Hand. Yeah, Helping Hand, even Roar. Encore as well. Really, Scrafty's pretty amazing. And its stats are absolutely nothing to scoff at either. It is slow, but it is pretty bulky. So like if you boost this HP stat, like I said with Sylveon, with wanting to boost the lower stat, you just want to really pump this HP stat. And so if you pump this HP stat, this thing gets bulky fast. And 90 base attack isn't a ton, but coming off of like a, what is it, like 110 base power? No, maybe it's not 110. I don't know. Maybe it's 90 something base power knockoff. That's going to deal a decent chunk and knock off an item. It's great utility. And I think this thing is like a baby Incineroar, kind of. It lacks the pivot moves, but there are a lot of different things that it gets, and I appreciate it for what it's worth. I think Klefki individually as well is very strong. I think it's an amazing support mon. I highly recommend it, and next season I will raise its point requirements, because this is not... There's no reason why this should be below Sableye, outside of Fake Out. Because Klefki really has better typing, has better stats, has a better secondary ability. I guess if you don't want to run Prankster, but you should most of the time be running Prankster. And just all in all, very strong Pokemon. And so, looking down here, it is a little ground weak. I think maybe Dodrio is a last-ditch effort to gain some ground immunity. Since Sceptile's not the best at that. But Rapid Striker Shifu also threatens ground types a lot. So, I don't know, it kind of depends. So, like, if it was something like Garchomp that was the offensive threat with Earthquake spam or something, I think that if you got Arcaliudon to have maybe a Terra type that resists ground, I think that takes away one ground weakness, and I think it gets a stamina boost, and I think it becomes very hard to handle for physical ground type attackers, which by all means is excellent. And I think that Rapid Striker Shifu, Surging Strikes, even in rain or with a Helping Hand or something, is always going to just hit like a truck. So your ground types have always got to watch out for, even Sceptile as well. So you really got to watch out for these two. So I don't think ground types are actually as big a deal as this kind of seems, because I do think that Braylon Boy has more answers to ground types than Chal does. And it's not necessarily as weak. But it is still a big problem with it. Fairy, I'm fine with. Do watch out for the Scrafty. Fighting hits mostly neutral and everything except for Sylveon, but Magmar also gets Flame Buddy. So if you redirect that, activate your Flame Buddy, burn the fighting type, which are most oftentimes going to be physical Pokemon, it's great because you protect your Archaeodon and lower their attack stat. Have it even. And so I think overall this team is very, very strong. I don't think it's perfect. I think there are definitely some weak points here. But I do like a lot of the little synergies that we get here. It's very, very cohesive in my opinion. Barring the Stojio, I don't know what this guy's doing here, but he can stay, I guess. I want to see him do something. If Braylon Boy can get him to pop off, I'll praise it later. But for now, I don't see it. But yeah, so overall, I think very strong. I think significantly better than last season. I think it's very, very good. I think it's a way better rain team this season than last season because it's not reliant on rain. And I think you can do different things with it. So I do believe that it is much stronger. And in fact, I do think it is stronger than the East Austin Archeops. Or not Archeops, Sceptiles. There we go. Okay, so I do think it's a solid A tier. Like I said, I think there's so many strong teams in this one, but I'm going to save S tier for really the cream of the crop teams that don't have like that same, necessarily ground weakness or general weaknesses in terms of being over reliant on one or two Pokemon. Like in which case, and here, this one's not over reliant on one or two Pokemon, but it does have crippling weaknesses to certain types, and I do think that the synergies just aren't there. Versus if we look at the Delmises again, I don't think that those crippling weaknesses are there, and I think that the Pokemon work much better together, even though it is really weak to ground types. But it is, still kind of reliant on these two to do damage or Sylveon to do damage, and then the rest are good supports, but you don't want to be locked with, like, I don't know, Klefki, Scrafty, Magmar, and then one offensive piece. Then you're kind of screwed. So overall, I think very strong. I just think it is a little bit dependent on this fantasy core, which I'm not upset at, but I do think it could be better. So, with that in mind, we are going to move on to our next team, the Weasels. Also, there are 12 teams this season. This is going to be a long video. But to go to the Virginia Beach Weasels, the rebrand of Weens' team. So, I like this. It's weird. No doubts. It's pretty weak across the board as far as stats go. And there are quite a few weaknesses to relatively common types, but then again, none of the weaknesses are like all the way across the board. There are resistances to counter them out. These really only highlight red, well, except for Ghost. Ghost is kind of messy, but for most of these, there's 2 resistances to Dark and 2 resistances to Fairy, even if you have 3 weak. So really, you can kind of play around it. So despite being so much red down here, I'm actually not concerned about this as much, because this is really different from the ground types from the other 2 teams, because 3 weaknesses to flying and 2 resistances, just have your 2 resistances to flying if you're worried about a flying type. And there's really not that many flying types. Bug is an incredibly uncommon offensive type. I don't think it's bad. I think it's okay. I think Ghost is also kind of uncommon, surprisingly. Fairy is very uncommon, outside of usually terrestrialization or some non-stab coverage. And I think Dark is okay to deal with, because you got Araquanid. But yeah, so looking at the team synergies, I like Motor Drive Follow Me. It is basically Pachirisu, but with stronger stats. And it's a little more expensive, but Motor Drive will give a speed boost instead of a special attack boost, and will be able to redirect those electric attacks with Follow Me. So I think Electivire is pretty strong. It gets good coverage, which helps with the Corviknight and helps with the Araquanid as well. I think overall, the team has strong potential with Ting Lu and Porygon 2 and Corviknight to be very bulky. And I think that Meowstic and Hitmontop with the Intimidate, Double Fake Out, and the Prankster Screens is, again, just a very good way of ensuring that you are going to be sticking around for a while. Duosion getting Encore, not that big of a deal to me. It's 1 point. Probably pretty bulky with Eviolite. I mean, I guess. It's not super great. But it really doesn't even want to be taking a knockoff, which anything with an Eviolite is going to. It's also competing for the Eviolite spot with Porygon too. So I really don't like this pairing, but I do understand that Duosion's 1 point. It's a very similar situation to Breloom Boy's Dodrio. So I don't think it's like necessarily a focus of the team. I think it's just something that Ween's picked up. I think Araquanid is a steal. I think it should have been more expensive, and I do regret putting it so low and not noticing it. But it has consistently performed at least decently in pretty major tournaments, at least, I don't know, maybe a month ago. I don't know where it is at now, but at least a month ago, this just water bubble is so strong. And so it has really, really powerful water type attacks. Can't be burned. Gets a damage boost from water bubble. Gets pretty good leech life, which can heal and gives some bug coverage for any dark types that it comes across. And Hitmontop also gets wide guard, which is nice, which doesn't show here. But yeah, Fake Out, Intimidate, wide guard. Gets coaching. It's Helping Hand. No taunt, actually. That's interesting. But yeah, so I think Hitmontop is good value. I don't think it's as good as Scrafty, personally, just because its stats are weaker. Like, it's really not got all that much bulk. Like, it's not bad bulk. It just doesn't. It's not as bulky as you'd want it to be. But it is good, and it does have some offensive power, just like Scrafty. Like, if you were in close combat on this thing, maybe even with a eject button, to kind of get like an Intimidate, like Fake Out, close combat, which switches you out, and then now you can bring another Pokemon in after getting a close combat off, and that's kind of like a really strong U-turn, essentially, which is kind of what Incineroar likes to do. So that's I don't doubt the power of this Pokemon. I just don't think it's as good as some other options, but for the points, it's a really, really good deal, and I think that it supports this whole bulky team idea that's going on here really well, just like Meowstic does. Meowstic's a menace. I don't off the bat immediately see anything other than like maybe Exeggutor with Sleep Powder. Like if you had Wide Lens Exeggutor with some Sleep Powder and you skill swapped it Prankster, because you can skill swap it Prankster to give it Prankster, and then it has Prankster Sleep Powder now, which is annoying. I would watch out for that. Ting-Lu is always kind of a menace. It's bulky. It doesn't want to die. And to be fair, not much on this team does. Despite this kind of mediocre looking stats here, I think that's really brought down by this Duosion. And I think that the rest overall are actually really quite bulky. So I would not put it past this team to just stick around and not die. And so I'm not excited for Ruination or potential Fissures, maybe even coming out from Ting-Lu. I never thought I'd see the day in draft, but here we are. And Chandelure, I think is great. I think Infiltrator is cool if you're playing like a mirror match. If you're playing another team that has bulky screens, I think Infiltrator is neat to bypass that. Also bypasses Substitute. So if you're running something like Sceptile with Shed Tail, that's something to be aware of. I think that it's a strong special attacker that gets Trick Room, and I think it's, I think it does its job. I don't think it's a great support Pokemon. I do think it gets good coverage, though. Like, it gets Energy Ball, it gets, I don't even know. It gets a lot of strong moves, though. And it's got a really, really high special attack. This 145 is absurd. One of the highest, if not the highest, special attack Pokemon in the league right now, I think. So, definitely don't underestimate this thing. And it's good typing, too. It's Hisuian, Typhlosion, and Skeledirge typing, which is just good. And by the way, gotta admit, this is one of my favorite type combinations. Not only because it's just good and strong for special attackers, but just because all of the designs for fire and ghost type Pokemon are so cool. And I think they just hit every single time. I don't think they ever miss with Fire Ghost, and I think that that's super cool. Um, Eggy Alola gets Frisk and Harvest, which can be interesting. Maybe some more stall stuff. Meowstic probably gets Sunny Day, to be honest, which I wouldn't doubt maybe next to Executor Alola or Chandelure. Uh, Porygon 2, obviously very bulky Trick Room setter with the potential to do things with Tri Attack, spread the hacks around, or even this generation gets download boosts and is even being run right now as sort of a terastallization sweeper where it runs Terra Blast to get the stab normal type damage, and then switch types and keep the damage, kind of like Sylveon does with its Terra Blast that gets Pixelate before it terastallizes, and then after terastallizes becomes a stab move. So I think that that's very strong. I don't think you should ever run Terra Blast on Sylveon if you're running Terra Fairy Sylveon, but I think Porygon 2 has to worry less about that, just because Pixelate doesn't exist for it. It kind of just gets the special attack boost from download potentially. So I mean, I'd consider if you're playing this team and you don't want Porygon 2 to get a special attack boost, which is really its primary form of offense, can be run with a physical set. I wouldn't put it past Weens, but it's just a little harder too. I think its special coverage is a little bit better. And so yeah, so I might consider messing with your EVs to ensure that your defense is lower than your special defense is for most Pokemon, because I believe it takes the average of both of the opposing Pokemon on the field and then averages that out, and whichever defense stat is lower, it uses to take the boost for download. So it is definitely something to consider as you play this team. But overall, I think this team, specifically outside of Araquanid and Chandelure, is not very offensive. I think it deals piss poor damage. Maybe Eggy Alola can prove me wrong, but I think really this team is just sit down and stall the opponent out. Like, it's very, very bulky. And I say this fully expecting Weens to break every idea that I have with this team and play it offensively somehow. But yeah, currently I think it's just, has decent coverage for everything. Its typing chart is not bad, despite this lot of red here, because it's really kind of just, having one more weakness than resistance. Like, there's no type here that isn't resisted by something. And so yeah, I think overall, a very bulky team. Will stick around for a long time. There are some competing things. Like, I don't think Porygon 2 and Duosion on the same team is good. I don't know how great maybe relying on Sunny Day if you want Chandelure to be boosted or for Harvest to work better, because then you can't run Araquanid as well. But then again, I think that Araquanid next to Tinglu with some Electivire and maybe a Porygon 2, I think that's just a solid Trick Room team with redirection. Or even Chandelure, Araquanid, Tinglu, Porygon 2. Bring your knockoffs, for sure. But then, otherwise, I think it's very solid. I love these two support mons. I am not surprised to see them go. I am surprised to see them go first and second round, but I think they're strong. And I think this is a solid team. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's as good as last season's team for Weens, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's just a different playstyle, and I'm excited to see. Well, I don't know. I'm excited to see it if Weens does fun stuff with it. I'm not excited to watch any of these matches if he just plays it very generically, because this team is not going to be fun to play or watch. This is just such a bulky do-nothing team. But it's not weak in any regard, so I think it's I think it's not weak. I don't think it's immediately oppressive, but I think it's pretty strong. And so for me, I think it's going A. So these tiers are unordered for now. I may order them at the end, may not, but for now they're unordered. I do think it's about the same level as the Delmize. I do think that the East Austin Sceptiles have a little bit weaker just because of the anti-synergy stuff, whereas these two teams really quite work well together. And I do think that kind of places them a little bit higher up than this team, even if I think a lot of the value on this team and the general stat spreads and things are so strong. But now we go to this one. I don't actually know how to say this, so someone will have to record themselves saying this and send it to me so I can say it in the future. But I absolutely love this logo. I think it's hilarious. I think this McDonald's thing with a bunch of burgers and the Gigantamax Pikachu, I think it's comedy. But let's pull up this team. I think this team is not comedy. I think this is a very strong team. In fact, I'm quite scared of this team. Because although it might not appear it at first, this is a Sunroom team. And Sunroom won Season 1. And Ursaluna's on this team. And Raging Bolt's on this team. And Cresselia is on this team. And this little menace is on this team. I think this team is very strong. I think there are some Pokemon that are kind of distractions. I think Avalokhisui is an ice type that has good potential if played in the right conditions, like under Trick Room, and against the right teams that are maybe weak to ice or some rock stuff. Strong Jaw on it is very good. I'd watch out for this, because this Pokemon actually does pretty good damage. Like, it has base 127 attack, which is wild. Especially with Strong Jaw. And I think you can make better use of that Strong Jaw than really Dreadnought can, because Dreadnought really wants to be using Swift Swim. This thing just needs Trick Room, and it works. Which you're going to get set up. There are very few ways to stop this team from setting up Trick Room. With Fake Out pressure from Sableye, technically only Sableye, but Sableye will be brought practically every game, in my opinion. And I do fully expect it to be running Fake Out a lot of the time. And even Prankster Taunt to stop your taunt, or Prankster Imprison to imprison your imprison before you can imprison the Trick Room. There's a lot of different ways that this team can stop you from stopping Trick Room. Or even just slapping Mental Herb on Cresselia. Like, if you only have taunt. So I really, really am concerned about how other teams are going to be able to stop this. Because this is very set up Trick Room and start doing your thing with it. There are a couple of immediate offensive pieces. I really like the Meowscarada, and I think that Charizard next to Sableye, but Sableye setting Manual Sun, I think that works well together. I think that Sun also works well with Raging Bolt, because even without Trick Room, it gets the priority Thunderclap, which enables it to use the Photosynthesis boost and a Life Orb, which is like, what? I don't know. A little over 1.6 times damage? Which is higher than Choice Specs, while still having the option to do other moves. Which is absurd. I'm very scared of these two Pokemon together. I'm not excited to play this team. Primeape, I think it's a little overrated. Jamion kind of introduced it in Season 1, and really, I think maybe wanted to show it off, but I really don't see Primeape doing the things that Annihilate can do. It's just not bulky enough, and I really don't think you want to be running Eviolite on it. Over certain other items, but if you don't run Eviolite, then it just doesn't have the same bulk. But then again, it's a low point mod. Granbull, it's a fairy type. I think teams enjoy fairy types. I think fairy types in general are very common. That's part of why I really like Braylon Boy's team, because it has that Sylveon, and I think that Sylveon is very strong, because it is one of, if not the most consistent fairy attacker. I think Granbull is a little less consistent. It's a physical attacker, it's slow. I think it can work well in Trick Room. I think its base stats are awful. Its attack is high. It's not like super high, but it is high. So it's going to be hitting pretty hard with Play Roughs, but the issue is Play Roughs isn't 100% accurate. Like, you'd much rather be using the not only stronger, but also more accurate Moonblast on a special attacking fairy. But for low points, I do think it's a pretty decent pickup for this team, especially with how heavy this team invests into Trick Room. I do think that it's just a very good option. And I think that for teams that are specifically weak to Fairy, quite like this team is, I just do think it is an option, and I think that it can work pretty well. I do think that Earthworm is amazing with Ursaluna and Cresselia and Charizard and Meowscarada. I think being able to have a resist in Meowscarada, an immunity that heals with Earthworm, and an immunity with Cresselia that can even skill swap an immunity to something like Raging Bolt, so that Ursaluna can start spamming Earthquakes, or Raging Bolt can start running, I don't know, dropping Dracos or something, I don't know, clicking Thunderclap. I think that really just, oh gosh, these two together, monstrous. But yeah, but I think there's a lot of really good synergy around Ursaluna here. I think there's a lot of good synergy around the Sun Sableye stuff. I think that Sableye enables a lot of things, and I think that Prankster Encore with Fake Out and Prankster Taunt, Prankster Will-Wisp, Prankster Thunderwave, I think they're all absurd. And I'm very excited to see what fun Sableye stuff. I don't think I've ever. I say this guy's a gremlin, but I don't think I've ever seen a team that runs Sableye that isn't at least doing something fun with him. And so I fully expect to see this guy do something fun. Charizard's at a bit of a weird spot. It did really well in Sword and Shield with Dynamax because it had max Airstream and the strongest fire attack in the game. And I think it lost some of that. I think it's great with Solar Power now still. I think it does a lot of good damage, and I think it has a decent speed. But it does kind of require that Sun. And so I do expect to only see it whenever Sun is being brought. But I could be wrong. But overall, it's just a solid special attacker. Meowscarada, immediate off-the-bat pressure. I mean, like this is like Regulation A kind of stuff, which is great. Because things like Flower Trick with Choice Band, or even using Sash and then letting yourself go to Overgrow range just to have stronger Flower Tricks, it's like a mini Urshifu, except it's faster. It's a little bit weaker, but it is faster. And I think it just brings something very valuable to this team in the form of immediate offensive pressure. And I think having Raging Bolt to do that with Thunderclap and Meowscarada to do that just by default makes it very strong. Because this team, while having a very strong Trick Room mode, is not entirely dependent on it. And I do think that that's a very good situation to be in. Alomomola, underrated Pokemon. I don't really think it gets too many support moves, but it is very bulky. And I do think it got Toxic maybe back. I don't know. But it gets Regenerator. So it's kind of like a Moongus. It doesn't get the redirection and the Sleep Powder. But it does do some interesting things. Like, I think it gets Chilling Water. And so I for cheap, I think it's great. And for a water type, I think it's okay. I think it's fine. You know, you've got two strong offensive fire and grass types. So I think having one bulky, more passive water type is generally good, because I think that this is a much better typing to have your bulky Pokemon be. And so yeah, so I like all these. I like Avalugg. Primeape's okay. Orthworm is great just by default because it's immune to this Earthquake, but it's also pretty good on its own because it can run Iron Defense Body Press sets. Gets that Earth Eater. It really only has one weakness, and that's to Fire, which Sableye can even put out with Rain. Because Raging Bolt can run Thunder in Rain, which goes crazy. A very similar situation to Chow's team, which I'm very, very excited to see some of this potential differing weather going on here. I mean, Ursaluna is always good. Raging Bolt, always good. This thing gets speed control, special attack drops with Snarl. It becomes incredibly bulky in certain situations. I mean, same thing with Ursaluna. These two things are unkillable, and I don't know how some teams are going to be able to handle both of them on the same team. But all in all, this team is very strong. I'm very scared of this team, and I think that the rest of the league should be too. And outside of this fairy weakness, which not many teams even have coverage to hit anyways, the stats, the spread here. I do think it's very specially not very strong outside of Raging Bolt, and I do think especially the special defense on this team is very lackluster. But I mean, physically, on the physical end, both offensive and defense, if you can very clearly see, it's just very strong. It gets great support moves. Sableye. The cohesiveness of the team is there. I see it. There are some Pokemon that stick out, like Primeape, and a little bit of Alomomola, but all in all, I think it's very strong. And yeah, I think this is going to be our first S tier. Yeah, I think it's a very strong team, and I think you can never underestimate these two, and this one. Whew. Okay, with that out of the way, my team The Orlando Oshawotts are back, going back from Skeleturges, or San Diego Skeleturges, because we have another San Diego team. But we'll get to them in a bit. And so I love this type spread. I think it's amazing. I think it's beautiful. I don't like the speed of this team, actually. I do think it is rather reliant on Trick Room. And I think that despite having, very strong defensive options in general, I do think it's one of the bulkier teams in the league, and I think it has both physically offensive and specially offensive capabilities, which is very nice to see. I do think that its speed is one of the weak points. So if it can't, handle a team that is trying to set tailwind for maybe some slower mons, or even just a team that's faster by default, I think that this team can struggle. But other than that, I think Rillaboom is great. I think Fake Out. I think Fake Out is always good, and Rillaboom is a great Pokemon to have Fake Out, because you want your Fake Out Pokemon to be something that you can bring to pretty much every match, and Rillaboom is that. Encore from Primarina is pretty good. Primarina in general is very strong. It gets some of the most consistent. I think it's one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent, water type attacker right now. Maybe barring Walking Wake, where Walking Wake gets Hydro Steam, but all of its sound moves can become, with Liquid Voice, can become water type. So things like Hyper Voice, just like Sylveon makes them Fairy type, Primarina will make them water type, which helps a lot with the water coverage because so many Pokemon lost Scald this generation. I do think Primarina is just a very premier, specially defensive, especially offensive Pokemon that can do a lot of good stuff, whether it sets up or not. I think that its initial special attack is good enough, and I think it's able to run Moonblast. I think it's able to hit like a truck if you get even just a couple boosts, and I think it's very bulky as well. So I do expect some a lot of bulk on this team in general, especially with Rillaboom being able to heal stuff up with grassy terrain. I think this team is going to make good advantage of being able to outlast the opposing teams. The Giraffe. This thing gets too much. It gets the ability to completely nullify grass moves. It gets the ability to completely nullify priority moves. It gets Cudgoo if it ever wants to run a bulky set. It gets a really good typing that's really only weak to Bug and Dark, which are both covered by a Terra Fairy. And I think overall it's just a very bulky Pokemon that can be used to set Trick Room and also serve as a Trick Room sweeper. I think the recent regionals have shown that, and I think that it's a very diverse Pokemon that can be run many different ways. Zapdos, I think, can be run very differently as well. I think for the most part, last season I ran it as a Choice Scarf with like very, very quick, powerful attacks. I think this season, maybe it runs a little bit bulkier set, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it goes full offense and Choice Scarf to kind of counteract some of this slower team. I don't know. I think it has options to do both, and I think it's one of, if not the best flying type attackers right now. And so I think I'm very happy with it being here, and it's anti-intimidate, which is very convenient. Umbreon's a steal for what it's worth. I think it was, 6 points maybe? 5 or 6. And I think that it gets a lot of powerful tools. It's very bulky. I mean, like, if you look at these stats, it's got insane bulk. Yeah, like, these are Cresselia stats with just, like, a little bit less HP. And it gets powerful tools. Like, it gets Foul Play, it gets Snarl, it gets Yawn, and it gets double screens as well. It's just very strong in general. And so I do like this. Ursaluna Blood Moon, probably one of the best special attackers right now, in and out of draft. Being able to hit ghost types with your normal moves just makes it so strong. Because really, like, the one type that you would be able to normally resist with this, or like normally get by against this ground and normal combination, is ghost. Because really what normal doesn't hit, ground usually does. Like those rocks types, those steel types. But then because this hits ghosts, then you get coverage for both. And Blood Moon is just so, like, the move is just so, or is it Mind's Eye? No, that's the ability. Yeah, I think it's Blood Moon. It's just so strong. It's 100% accurate. Like, sure, it has a refresh period, but being able to fire such a powerful move with this, with little to no drawback, is absolutely absurd. And then It also is very good Terra abuser because it can not only gain new typing with really good bulk, but it can also uh, gain that coverage. So it can serve as a way to maybe get some coverage that the team might be lacking in any situation. I don't know, where that would come in handy specifically, but can do that. Um, and I think it's just overall, it's a premier trick room attacker, and I think it works extraordinarily well for draft. So yeah, so I'm very excited to use this Pokemon. Magmortar, I like it for the same reasons as Magmar, except I like it a little bit more. A, because it's cheaper, and B, because it doesn't rely on EV Light as much. And it has some offensive pressure. It's like this Pokemon is a little less bulky than Magmar, but it also has the same special attack stat as Armarouge. So this thing can be a powerhouse, and it can threaten, like when you see it, you can't assume immediately whether it's a supportive set or whether it's an offensive set. And I really like that. I think that that's very true for, to be honest, most of this team. Like I think Rillaboom can be run very supportive. I think it can also be run very offensively. I think for a giraffe, same thing, can be run very bulky, very supportive, very slow, or it can be run extremely offensively as well. Some throat spray, hybrid voice stuff. Gets psychic noise now, which is very nice. Gets just a lot of different powerful tools and a lot of different things that it can imprison. And I think I'm excited to see what it does. Caparaja, I had in season 1, so this is an Orlando Oshawott staple. I do love it with Sheer Force. I think it has one of, if not the strongest Iron Heads in the game using Sheer Force. And I think it's nothing to scoff at, and I think it's relatively bulky and can be a really good trick room sweeper. With this 122 HP and 130 attack with Sheer Force. Like if we see how well Lando Eye is doing with Sheer Force, I think Caparaja has some potential into certain teams. I think it's very matchup specific, but I think it's strong. And then for the final 1 point, I think Rotom, just having it's decent speed, but then mainly its coverage and like support moves, not really coverage, but like support moves like Will-O-Wisp, Thunder Wave, double screens. It gets Volt Switch. It gets Helping Hand. Does it get Pain Split? It might get Pain Split back. I don't know. I'd have to check. But just overall, it's a very strong Pokemon simply because for 1 point you get a lot of moves. Because like for most of the 1 point mons are either really bad attackers or really underwhelming stat wise. And Rotom is pretty underwhelming stat wise, but it has some move coverage that I think I can make use of. Especially since it got Electro Webs back, which can help with this actually. A decently slow team, because a lot of these are actually middling speed rather than necessarily slow. So don't expect this team to run purely slow, because I don't think it will. And I think that the typing is great for the team. I just really like having Rotom as well. I think it's cute. But overall, I think this is a very, very powerful team. And although I tend to try to be humble, I do think it is one of the premier teams of the league. I think it's very obvious what the team wants to do, and I think it's a very good, very very open threat to everyone that's kind of just saying, "Hey, you know what I want to do, stop me." And I think that it has so many ways of stopping you from stopping it, and it's so bulky and so with so many supportive mons that can do different things. Like Rotom gets Eerie Impulse, Umbreon gets Snarl, Rillaboom gets that Grassy Terrain to make everything have leftovers, basically. And Magmortar gets Follow Me with some redirection with Flame Body to potentially make some burns as well. And so it's so bulky and so hard to take out any one Pokemon, while all of the other pieces around it are all also offensive. Like Rillaboom's a strong attacker, Primarin's a strong attacker, Verdurf can be a strong attacker, Zapdos is a strong attacker, Ursaluna, Blood Moon, Magmortar, and Caparaja are all strong attackers, even if they do other things as well. And so I think overall, it's very hard. I think it's a very, very common trend with me is that you really can't tell, depending on just the Pokemon alone, what is going on with the team. And I think that that's very strong. And so that, and with the type chart being immaculate, and with the overall power level of the Pokemon on the team, I do have to put it up here as well. The Philadelphia Politoads. We have to look at this because they did it again. It's a little bit better after the grace, or okay, it's a little bit less top heavy after the grace period trades. Do I think it's better? Personally, no. I don't think that Hatterene and Rapska are. While Rapska does have Revival Blessing, I just don't think that there's a good Trick Room mode on this team. I think it is very, 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 very obvious what these four want to do. This Iron Jugulus is just Frostlass, but better. So you actually have the ability to set Tailwind now, and you get Snarl stuff, and you can use Booster Energy instead of Choice Scarf. I fully expect these four to come to every match. I would not doubt it. I know that Rapska gets Telepathy Explosion stuff, and Hatterene can maybe set Trick Room for that. I know Houndstone probably won't be using Sandrush, but we'll be getting some pretty good use out of Fluffy, so it does get some solid defense with this. Pikachu, I don't expect to see a lot, but I think it's funny. I think that I think Lightning Rod can work, maybe if you're running it next to Ogerpon Wellspring and you terrestrialize it, or Iron Jugulus even, but even then, I don't know. I don't know if that's worth bringing just for Lightning Rod. It can hold that Light Ball, and it can get it's double its offensive stats, but like these are low enough that you're really not going to be using them anyways. And Pikachu being the only Fake Out as well. Because last season they had Iron Hands. I think Iron Hands brought a lot more with this Fake Out than not having it does. Ogerpon and Wellspring. I mean, okay, let's get the Pokemon out of the way. Very, very strong. Very, very strong. Very, very strong. Very, very strong. Okay. Pretty bad, but gets Revival Blessing. Bad. Pretty strong. It's a very good Trick Room Pokemon that has some supportive options, I think. And I think it's pretty bulky as well. And then this one's okay. Like, if you see it, don't let it explode on you. But also don't be too afraid of it exploding on you, because then you enter the mind games. So, good luck if you see this in Team Preview. Sturdy as well. Gosh. Anyways. But yeah, so I mean, Flutter Mane, very versatile with its booster energy. And I think it can do very different things. I think it can be very fast. I think it can be very strong. And I'm excited to see it out of T. Clark's hands this season. I fully expect it to be more like Goldango was for Chris last season, as an offensive spread powerhouse, which I do expect to perform much better than the way that T. Clark was running it as more of a fast supportive Mon or a bulky supportive Mon, which I don't think is bad to run it like that. I just don't think it's making the best use of it. And I think that's part of the reason why I was nominated for like the Messi Award. But yeah, so I think I'm excited to see it in Chris's hands, because I want to see what this thing could do. Arcanine Hisui with Tailwind support, especially if you start, I would love to see a Rockhead boost the recoil, or boost the damage of recoil moves with Tailwind, so you get like things like Head Smash and Flare Blitz doing insane damage. But in general, you're going to be running Intimidate, and it's just very bulky, very consistent, very strong. It is rather weak to ground types, but the rest of the team really isn't, so I'm not super concerned about it. Team is weak to water types. Ogerpon is immune to water type moves and gets redirection. So, iffy on how much I'd actually be concerned about it. Ogerpon in general, in draft, I don't know why we let 4 of these things exist, but Encore, Follow Me, it gets Taunt as well, it's fast. Gets that Ivy Cudgel, Horn Leech, Wood Hammer, Spiky Shield. I think just all in all, it's a very strong Pokemon, and I kind of don't want to talk about it again going forward, so I'm just going to kind of get that out of the way. In this case, gets a special defense boost, gets really strong water types. It performed very well for Chris last season. I'm glad to see it back in his hands, because I think he can use it well, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what he's able to do with Iron Jugulus next to these Pokemon, because I think that it can be a strong core. And I think that maybe there's a little bit of stuff going on over here that, like, this gets Will-O-Wisp, this gets Last Respects, potentially, even, if you want to run it offensively. I think this is rather weak outside of Sand teams. I think Rabska's rather weak as well. It gets pretty good special attack, but this typing is abysmal. It's weak to so much. Hatterene's really good. I just don't think this is the team for it. And Golem Alola, it does things. Pikachu is Pikachu. We have talked about it. So overall, I think that this core works really well together. I don't think any of the rest of this does. So even though this is a very strong team, and I fully expect people to struggle against it, maybe even lose against it, I might lose against it. But I think the fact that Iron Hands is gone and this team no longer has Fake Out for itself, I think makes it a lot easier to handle some of these stronger cores where it's top heavy like this. I must admit, I did like the pre-Grace period team a little bit better, but I can understand trying to diversify into some lower point Pokemon. And I do appreciate that. So maybe we'll see some changes as we move forward, but I do think it's rather weak, actually, compared to last season. I think that last season was a little bit stronger for Chris, and I think that this season, it does one thing. Like, if you can bring these 4 Pokemon to every match, probably, and be fine. I just think that opponents are able to prep for this, and I don't think that it's very... I don't think you have the same supportive mons that you did last season to be able to adapt that team to many different situations like you would before. But, I mean, based on how Chris played throughout playoffs, same team the entire time, and it worked. People couldn't stop it. And so, I don't doubt that it'll work here. I just don't think it's a very malleable team. I think it's a very one-trick pony, very consistent, very standard VGC looking stuff, but I just don't think it's very diverse in how it plays. And for that reason, I actually think it is going into the B tier. I don't think it has the same cohesiveness as these two. So I think it's along the East Austin Sceptiles for kind of similar reasons. I really do think that it's just not the most cohesive overall. And even though it has strong pieces, I don't think that they necessarily work the best together. The San Diego Dondozos is up next. And so when we do this one, this is the team that took to be fair, rightfully took the location name back. And I think that this is a very scary team. I personally don't know how we let these 5 Pokemon plus Tornadus go to the same team. I think Tornadus Therian is incredible value. I think it's very strong Trick Room, and I think it's one of the most consistent flying type attackers, actually, as well. So even though its attack and special attack aren't that strong, I do think it gets good coverage, because it gets a Bleak Wind, it gets Heat Wave, and I think it does the things that Tornadus likes to do without the Prankster, but it's bulkier, it gets Regenerator, it's faster, and it also still has the same moves, so it still can benefit from having that Bleak Wind Storm that Tornadus Incarnate got. I think Excadrill, I don't think this is the right team for it, but I think it can work. I think that it can. I mean, even Tornadus can even set weather still. So you can still probably expect Tornadus Therian to maybe even set Sandstorm for Excadrill, which would be neat. I think that it could work. But overall, I think maybe Mold Breaker to hit some things with Earthquake that have Levitate is pretty nice, because if you're playing that team with Raging Bolt, if Cresselia tries to skill swap Levitate onto Raging Bolt and you just hit it with a Mold Breaker Earthquake, I think that's going to do really big damage, and I look forward to seeing that. And I think mainly it was drafted as a Steel type, and I think that's okay as well. I think it has a very strong attack stat, and I think it can Iron Head pretty well. So that's pretty good. But overall, this team is, in my opinion, the premier physical attacking team of the league. Because with Excadrill and Iron Valiant and Iron Hands, I think you're doing a lot with your physical attackers. And yeah, because they just have so much. If you look at the stats, those 4 alone really just carry the attack stat for everything else. So even though there are things like Screamtail and Moongus that really, and even Typhlosion, Suvi and stuff, that don't have great attack stats, those other ones are so strong that they bring it up. Iron Hands having 140 attack, Excadrill having 135 attack, Iron Valiant having 130 attack as well. And all having such good coverage, I think that's just amazing. And I think just like I was talking about Chris's team having Iron Hands last season, I think this Pokemon is incredibly diverse in what it's able to do, even if it runs the same sets. Because into different teams, it behaves differently. It can behave as an offensive piece. It can behave as a pivoting fake out user that's bulky and can take hits and switches, or on switches. Sorry. And I think against other teams, it can be maybe even a setup sweeper or a Trick Room sweeper. And I think that with Screamtail, I think that's incredible, because I think the Screamtail is the most annoying Pokemon in draft probably. And I don't I don't know why it was so low in points, but having that Encore disable, having Rock Tomb even to have a little bit of speed control, having Perish Song even potentially. There's so many different options that this thing gets for supportive moves that can make it just a nightmare to play against. It gets double screens too, and it's just such a good type with so much bulk. It's like Hatterene on steroids with great speed that can also use booster energy. I don't know why this Pokemon was invented. I don't know why Iron Hand was invented. I don't know why some of these Paradox Pokemon are the way they are, but they are very strong. Mungus, generally thought to be weaker in draft, and I do agree with that opinion, but I also think that just having Spore and Redirection is always something you have to think about. So I don't think you can ever overlook it, and I think that you have to always respect it, which leads to you, in general, wanting to bring grass types or things that are immune to Spore or Rage Powder, right? So you'd run Safety Goggles and stuff. Safety Goggles takes up items. Berries, they take up items. Running Terra Grass makes it so you can't Terra something else that maybe would resist some of the other Pokemon better. And even makes you weak to Amoonguss itself if it runs Pollen Puff or Sludge Bomb, which can be a struggle. And especially if you're running Terra Grass. I think that the fact that this team immediately drafted Typhlosion Hisui right after, with Frisk and those, potentially Choice Scarf or Choice Specs or Life Orb, depending on the team that it's going against, having that and the Eruption, I think that's very strong, especially if you're trying to, catch teams that had the Terra Grass as an option to counter Amoonguss off guard. I think that that's very strong, because I think having that powerful fire attack, even spread fire attack, into teams that want to deal with Amoonguss is just so strong. So I think really this core works incredibly well together. I think Iron Valiant has amazing coverage, and I think it's got good stats, and I think that just like I was talking about with my team, with being able to not tell what it necessarily wants to do, this is the same thing, except it is offensive. So it can run support moves. So it does get Encore, like Screen Reflect, Taunt, Knock Off, Thunder Wave, and even Helping Hand. But for the most part, you just don't know if it's going to be a physical or special attacker. And I think that's a huge threat going into it, because it can really adapt to whatever situation it's in. Because if it's going against, for example, where's the team? Like this team. This team is much weaker on the special end than it is on the physical end, right? And so if you want to run Iron Valiant, you might run it on the special side instead of the physical side, because you know that Aura Sphere is going to be hitting Avalok Hisui a lot harder on its 36 special defense than its 184 special defense. And so I think generally trends like that just allow that team to perform extremely well. And so I am not very surprised at all to see this thing go. And Excadrill as well is generally strong. Bruxish is good because it's anti-priority, but I don't expect to see too much out of it. I know Matt drafted it last season, and I think it's very good in niche situations, but I think it's just not bulky enough and not strong enough in most situations to be used. Bombardier is interesting. I've looked at it several times in the past. Having Rocky Payload is interesting because it's kind of like a third stab without actually being a rock type, which is kind of amazing since rock types kind of suck. But you still get Rock Slide and stuff, which is nice. But for the most part, I think its stats are kind of underwhelming. It is a low point mon, just like Bruxish. But its typing is pretty good, because it's the same typing as Mandibuzz or Iron Jugulis, which is generally, or even Galarian Moltres, and they generally perform very well together. Flying and Dark Dew. So I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see it once or twice. But overall, I think that the team synergy here is extremely strong, because I think Amoonguss forces you to play in certain ways that Iron Hands kind of handles, that Typhlosion Hisui can threaten if you try to handle the Amoonguss, that Iron Valiant can kind of handle if you try to, I don't know, let's say you wanted maybe, a fighting type to deal with Excadrill, Iron Valiant handles it. If you wanted a steel type to deal with Screamtail or even Iron Valiant itself, it doesn't really work, because you're going to get hit with the fighting moves from Iron Hands or Iron Valiant. If you have, a water type, for example, to hit Typhlosion Hisui and try to resist its eruptions, Iron Hands is going to hit you like a truck. So I think overall this team is extraordinarily cohesive, and I'm very afraid of it. I think this is another. I don't actually know, because I don't necessarily like this half of the draft. I like Tornadoes, but I don't like a lot of these other ones, and I do think it's very limited in what it can bring. But I do think that this team is very strong. I think it's quite like Chris's team was last season, and where it has the option to bring maybe any one of these Pokemon, but you're really always going to see like these five, and I do expect that to be the case, and I do like those five a lot. So I think it's very strong, and for that reason, I think for different reasons than these two, I will put them as well in the A tier. Next, we have Ted back. Ted being back is nice. Unfortunately, I don't understand this team. I think Double Intimidate is fun. I don't think that there are really the offensive pieces there to make it work, though. Because really, there's Magnezone, there's Walking Wake, and maybe Articuno as offensive pieces on the special end. And then there's really only Thunderous Therian on the physical end. So overall, I think it's very offensively weak. But unlike Weens' team, I don't see the real defensive prowess of the team either. So while I understand Incineroar is great, I think it's an amazing Pokemon. I think it's having the ability to pivot and intimidate things is great. And Fake Out, I think it's the most consistent Fake Out in the game. I think it's amazing. I think that Comfey is great for healing stuff, but I don't think there's much on the team that is going to be taking many hits to be healed. There are a lot of pretty crucial 4x weaknesses here. A lot of weaknesses to ground, and while there are two immunities, those are also weak to ice, which happens to be another weakness of the team. And so so really anything that's not weak to ground is weak to ice. So if you have ground and ice attackers, I don't know what this team does against that. I don't think Riolu gets Follow Me in this generation, so I don't know why that's there. But it does get coaching. It does get Prankster. Copycat, even. So I'm excited to maybe see some stuff with that. It gets Prankster. What else does it get? Honestly, I'm not sure. I think Riolu, I know it's pretty good value for being so cheap, because it does get that Prankster ability. I just don't think it's the best. I don't think it necessarily has the same support move pool that maybe something like Klefki does, or Sableye does, or Whimsicott does, and for that reason, it's okay. But even with coaching, which is I think is a great move, the only Pokemon that you're really going to be even able to use coaching on are Incineroar and Landorus. And for Incineroar to be one of your strongest offensive pieces and not a support Pokemon is not a good sign for the rest of the team, in my opinion. I think Magnezone is very strong. I think Walking Wake is very strong. I don't know what Walking Wake is doing on this team, though. I get that it can do booster energy stuff, and I get that it's a dragon type, and it's got consistent water type. Just like I was praising, what's it called, Primarina before, for being a very consistent water type. I think that Walking Wake is also a very consistent water type. But I think that it really needs to be in Sun to hit like a truck. And I think that if it's giving up its item for booster speed, or I just don't think it's going to be hitting the damage output that really you would want to see out of it. I think maybe Riolu may get Prankster Sunny Day, which in that case, okay, I can kind of see it. But even still, I think that you'd be needing to run Booster Special Attack or Life Orb in order to really hit hard with it, and I do expect that to come. I just don't think that there's very much speed control on this team outside of, I understand that Articuno gets Tailwind and Trick Room. I understand that Comfey gets Tailwind and Trick Room. I think that it can be tough to ensure that they do get it up, and I think that it can be tough to ensure that even when they do get it up, that that you can even make it worthwhile. Because while Magnezone is good, I don't think it's the most consistent, and it kind of hates ground types. And while Landorus and Articuno are pretty decent as well, just like I was saying before, they're weak to ice types. Superior It's pretty fun with the new Stellar Terra with Contrary. Um, but it's really not very offensive off the bat, and I don't think it's bulky enough, especially not with its typing of pure grass, to really take advantage of anything that this team can do. I think it's just very, very difficult for this team to get going offensively, and it can't stick around for long enough to do anything defensively either. Um, so yeah, so I'm not super excited about this team, but I think it's got a lot of cool Pokemon, and I'm excited to be proven wrong. Again, I make these tier lists as a way for people to surpass my expectations and show me new things, because I'm always excited to learn about the game and different ways that you can run things. And I'm hoping that Ted can show that here, because I don't see the vision, but I know that everyone who drafts their team definitely sees a vision for their team. And I'm excited to see this one, because I think that Triage Comfey is very strong. I think that Intimidate with Incineroar, great support mon. I think that Landorus is a very strong attacker if you run Choice Scarf or even Choice Band potentially. I don't think it really gets the best stab moves, because it really relies on Stomping, Tantrum, and Fly, which kind of sucks if it doesn't Terra. So that, but I mean, you got double Intimidate pivot, so that's nice. You get competitive Articuno Galar, but I don't know. I mean, there's not really much Intimidate. Like, you stole all the Intimidate, so competitive really isn't going to be proccing as much as you'd like it to. Again, Superior is kind of good with the contrary stuff. Muck is okay. It's a 1-point poison one. It's got pretty decent bulk. But overall, I don't think it will be doing much. Maybe knock off here and there. Sludge Bomb. Sudowoodo, I'm interested in. Just because I think, honestly, I think it gets a pretty decently strong head smash. Like off of 100 base power with Rockhead. So it's almost like an Arcanine, because Arcanine's what, like 115, like assuming Arcanine, 115 base attack maybe. So really, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see that thing doing a lot of damage in Trick Room, if Ted decides to set it up. But overall, I think they're a very powerful Pokemon on this team, like Incineroar, like Landorus Therian, even like Articuno Galar or Walking Wake. I just don't think they work well together. So yeah. I think this is one of the weaker teams so far. So, for that reason, unfortunately, we have our first C tier. Now, we are moving on to a new individual to the SV League, which is the Terra Dark Tyrants, which is my last sheet here. This is double terrain. I was frustrated a little bit because I did one Ogerpon Hearthflame as well. I think it's a very strong Pokemon. I think this alone is threatening. I think Thwackey is good for budget, but I don't really. I know that Draco. This is Draco's team, by the way. I know that Draco says it can do work. It can put in work, and I'm excited to see it. I don't think it can do the same things that Rillaboom can do. It does set grassy terrain still, but I just don't think that it's got the same offensive and staying presence that Rillaboom does. So I'd be interested to see how it gets handled. But it still does have Fake Out. Still gets some neat moves like Snarl. It gets Taunt as well in U-turn. So it's decent in its own right. But it is cheap, so it's good value, I think. Sneasler, I wanted Sneasler. I actually was planning on drafting Sneasler. So I was very upset to see it go. But with double terrain, it's very obvious that this Sneasler is going to be making great use of its Unburden ability. It gets good coverage. I think this team lacks redirection to keep it alive in certain situations, which can be frustrating. But it does get Fake Out, and it does get very powerful attacks, and can Swords Dance up in the right situations. I know that in Season 1, I was really able to make it work because I had Indeedee, which was able to redirect away while it Swords Danced up. But I think in this case, I think it will be more of an immediate offensive threat. Potentially even using maybe some Mirror Herb stuff, but I don't know if anything here gets Swagger. So I'd be interested to see some of that. Iron Boulder, I quite like. Quark Drive, at first whenever I saw this, I was like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting because I don't really know what this is doing here. Because really, you're going to use your booster energy. So, like, okay, cool. It's your booster hog, which is good. It's good to have one of those because it's a strong item. But breaking through protect is cool. Having a consistent rock move is great. I really like rock moves in draft. I think that's very strong. I think rock moves in general are strong. There's a reason why Glamora with Meteor Beam is so powerful right now in VGC, is just because it's a consistent, strong offensive type. And I think that Iron Boulder does that well. I don't like its psychic type very much. I think that this struggles in a lot of situations because it really can't make use of a lot of the best psychic moves. So, like, you're not getting psychic, you're not getting expanding force, really. Like, I'm sure it does get them, but you're not going to use them. I mean, unless you do. You can, but, like, that's an abysmal special attack stat. But really, you're kind of left with, like, Zen Headbutt or Psycho Cut. And in both cases, that's a lot weaker than I think you'd really like for it to be. But after I saw, like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what this is going on, immediate Pincurch and Raichu Lola. So, like, really, this is your... Even Sneasler can be included in this, because Sneasler works with both terrains. But this is all kind of just an electric terrain mode that I actually quite like, because I really like the speed on Raichu Lola. It still gets Fake Out. It gets strong electric type moves in the terrain and gets to go really fast, and actually can make use of some of these powerful psychic moves. So yeah, I do like this, and I like Iron Boulder being able to activate stuff and hold an item as well, while still getting its Cork Drive ability. And Sneasler, obviously getting the Unburden still is good. And even Ogerpon can work in this core as well, so it's not just limited to the Grassy Glide stuff with Grassy Terrain, but it works really well with Electric Terrain as well. So it's very, very reminiscent for me of Feather's team from Season 1. But all in all, I think that this is a strong Electric core. I think that these are all weak to ground, but I think that Thwacky potentially, with its, I think can potentially make it a little bit harder to just prep and say, okay, well, I just need ground, simply because it reduces the power of Earthquake with Grassy Terrain. And I think that Ogerpon and Azumarill, to be honest, both of them, hit those ground types very hard. So in situations like Garchomp, like this fairy is going to hit it hard. And situations like, I don't even know, like maybe the Ursaluna, right? This water type is going to be hitting very hard, and this thing can belly drum up next to these Fake Out mons, which is very nice. It's like, for example, Sneasler as well can also set up maybe next to the Fake Out mon. Like if Raichu uses Fake Out or Thwacky uses Fake Out, maybe it can get a Swords Dance boost up that way as well. And I'm excited to see how that all kind of comes together. And so I think Azumarill is also a really good piece, because even with just Ogerpon Follow Me, it can get... Oh, actually, I was talking about no redirection before. This team does have redirection. In fact, one of the best redirection Pokemon of all time. So yeah, I actually do... I expect to see a lot of setup with Sneasel. I expect to see setup with Azumarill. And I do think just overall, it can be very strong like that. And maybe even Nasty Plot Raichu Lola. I think they're very, very strong right now with that Ogerpon. And so actually, I do kind of see the vision of this team a little bit more. And I think Azumarill is just strong overall. I think having a strong fairy type, even if it has to use Play Rough, which is not ideal, but it at least has huge power and can boost its attack further with Belly Drum, which makes it stronger than Granbull in my opinion, because it's really not reliant on those fairy moves. It can also use the water moves, which are even more consistent on the physical end. So yeah, I think this is a strong Pokemon as well. Noivern with Frisk is pretty good. It's got Tailwind support. It can do some neat things. I've looked at it before. It's pretty weak for trying to do certain things. Like, you can't really spam Boom Burst with Terra Normal, because it just isn't strong enough. But it is fast, and it can set Tailwind, and so there can be potential times. I mean, really, you don't need to, with Ogerpon being so fast anyways, and your two, like your Raichu Lola and Sneasler and your terrain, and even Iron Boulder with potential Quark Drive or Booster Energy, they're all just so fast by default because of your terrain modes, that really you don't even need the Tailwind from Noivern. Stantler's neat because it gets Skill Swap and Trick Room and Eviolite to make it pretty bulky, and it gets Intimidate. Frisk and Sapsipper I don't expect to see as much, but that could be brought. So it's a decent, really, really, really cheap Intimidate mon that I don't expect to see a lot of use, but definitely can. Spiritomb is kind of neat as well. I think it's got great support moves, and I think that it's relatively bulky. Again, with the low HP but high defenses. So I think if you pump this HP, I think it can be very, very bulky potentially. And Infiltrator is nice as well, just to be able to bypass Substitute and do things like Will-O-Wisp. so they're no longer immune to status moves in that case behind that substitute. So I think that that's strong as well. And then Gliscor, I think, is also very consistently strong as well. It also gets Tailwind. I don't see it getting much use just because the team is naturally so fast compared to everything else in the league. And I think that it gets strong single target ground type damage, even if it struggles a little bit for some flying damage without like something like acrobatics. But then you'd run no item, in which case I don't really know. It gets good abilities though too. Can run poison heal with some toxic orb and be pretty bulky, or it can go more offensive, run hyper cutter, and then its attack can't be lowered by intimidate or anything. So I think that's very strong in general. And so all in all, I think it's very good. I think there are some weaker pieces. Like I think if you want to run your grassy terrain, I don't think that Thwackey is the best. I don't think that Pincurchin. I'm not a Pincurchin hater. I'm a believer, but I don't think it is the best Pokemon ever. And so I do think that it can perform decently well with some chilling water or some sucker punches here or there. So maybe like a Zing Zap or a Thunderbolt. An electric terrain is always going to be strong. I just don't think it's very, it's very okay across the board. It's kind of a low HP, decent defensive situation with like okay offensive pieces, but it's very slow. So if they decide to run Trick Room, which I don't even know if they can, I don't think they can. I guess it's that it can counter that, but really just being so slow means it gets its terrain up, which is good if it ever encounters another team with terrain like mine or like Twims. Spoiler, we haven't seen that team yet. But yeah, so I think Ogerpon Hearthland with the redirection to allow some setup Pokemon and to also just serve as a keystone offensive piece as well. I think that just overall this team is pretty good, pretty solid. I think it has, some type deficiencies here, some pretty intense weaknesses. But I also think it's, relatively cohesive, even if it has some team members that I don't think are that strong. But all in all, pretty good. So for the Terra Dark Tyrants, I think I'm going to have to put them in A tier. I think I'm conflicted. No, I'm not. I'm not conflicted. I think they're a solid A tier team. Because I believe that Ogerpon is just strong enough to be able to allow those Pokemon to set up when it wants to, or be an offensive piece. And I do like that diversity in how it's able to run either or and get that attack boost, or run more defensive follow me sets, just like Ogerpon Wellspring can. It's not like they change stats or anything. So I think there's a lot of potential there, despite the type weaknesses. Because I think it has the same cohesive energy as these teams do, while still having that like one or two little parts about it that doesn't make it quite as good as these teams up here. Now we get to talk about the Psychic Terrain team. We get to talk about the Grumpy Pigs, which obviously love the nickname there. Indeedee female, very, very strong. I love this Pokemon. I think priority blocking, follow me, one of the better premier follow me users until we let Ogerpon on every other team. But yeah, Psychic Surge to enable your own Iron Crown to be able to hit psychic moves like Expanding Force very well. Tachyon Cutter is also very good. I think Iron Crown is a very strong special attacker that goes and pairs well with TDF. I do think I would have liked to see it paired with some other form of speed control other than Trick Room. So like I know that Braviary gets Tailwind, but I think I would have liked maybe a bulkier Tailwind setter that can actually do pretty well. Like I would not have minded seeing an Iron Jugulus on this team at all, but unfortunately it's taken. But yeah, so I think Iron Crown with booster speed though can help fix its speed, but then it struggles offensively. So I think normally if you're running, you want it to do a whole bunch of damage. You want either booster special attack or life orb or something, and having to run booster speed for that speed control just kind of eliminates that possibility, which I don't completely enjoy, but I also think it's still strong, very strong Pokemon. It's a paradox near legendary, super legendary stats. So I think it's just very strong with very strong expanding force. I think the helping hand, follow me, heal pulse, trick room. Now that it got that through raids, everything that in DDF has to offer, I'm just a big fan of, and I think that all of this league has seen enough of in DDF to know that it's really, really a powerful support mon. Politoed, I don't like as much as Pelipper because it doesn't get the same supportive moves that are so helpful in VGC. But it does enable a little bit of a rain mode and weakens the fire moves that might threaten Iron Crown, and also works well with Kingdra to give it Swift Swim and allow it to become a somewhat decent special attacker, or even physical attacker apparently, because it's the same stat. I'm personally not a big Kingdra fan because I think it's very middling stats across the board, and I don't super love that. But I also know that there are a lot of believers in Kingdra, and I think that it can hit hard with a Draco Meteor, or a Dragon Pulse, maybe. I don't know. I just don't think its special attack is very high, or it's either of its attacking stats. But it does have some strong move options, and it can also get support from in DDF and Politoed with Helping Hand as well. But overall, I mean, it's like kind of like a baby version of Walking Wake. And then Politoed gets things like Icy Wind, but it's not very fast, so it's hard to make use of it. It gets things like Helping Hand, which is good. It gets Encore, which is fine, but it's not super bulky. And then what else does it get? Oh, it gets Parasong, which can work, but it's also very hard to stay alive, I think, with this team somewhat. Because I think other than like maybe the special defense that can even be boosted by some Psychic Seed stuff with this team here, I think other than that it can kind of struggle a little bit because it can. Even then, because like opponents can also use Psychic Seed on their own Pokemon if you bring in DDF to resist some of these like all of these special attackers, right? Because really your only physical attackers are going to be Glade and Braviary. And like I said, maybe Kingdra, but not really. Its special coverage is significantly better. And so yeah, so I think Politoed has some neat things that it can do. I just don't think it does them very well, and especially not on this team. But I do like that it is a rain setter, and I do like that it's paired with Kingdra. What I don't like is that there's immediately after that a Torkoal. I didn't like Chanpao, but I also don't like competing weather on this team. I think that Sunroom is significantly better than Rain Room is, because, I mean, it's very obvious within DDF and Glade that the primary form of speed control for this team, outside of the Booster Energy and the Swift Swim, is going to be Trick Room. With your slow Clodsire, that also gets after you, I don't know. Whichever one makes it go after your opponent, which I didn't get to show off in Season 1, but I did want to. So Clodsire, I can actually give any Pokemon here base 20 speed, basically at the cost of an entire Pokemon slot, which is interesting. It does some interesting stuff, but, I think Clodsire is pretty bulky, though, which is very nice. And it gets Water Absorb, which is also very nice. But yeah, so I think Torkoal, competing weather, I think it's pretty anti-synergistic, but I do think it works well with the Trick Room mode. So if you bring one or the other, I think it can be okay. But I just don't think you want Iron Crown in Trick Room as much as something like maybe Armor Rouge or any other, even Hatterene. Like I think Hatterene with Expanding Force would have fit this team much better than Iron Crown does, because I think Iron Crown goes a lot better with things like Whimsicott than it does with Torkoal, Glade, and that sort of thing. But I do like this sort of as a rain core. I don't understand why Torkoal's here, especially with Salazzle already. Because you're doubling up on poison types, you're doubling up on fire types. I don't know. It's very ground weak. Yet another team that's just ground weak. So many in this league right now. And Dark weak. Gosh. Dark hits across the board, which is crazy. Even though Glade does get like Sacred Sword, maybe? It gets Sharpness boosted, which can be strong and can be an answer to the Dark types, but it is also kind of frail. At least more frail than I would want it to be, especially on the defensive end, physically defensive end. So I know Glade gets Wide Guard, which is neat. I know it gets Trick Room and gets Sharpness, obviously, which makes it actually got Sharpness 6th generation, which makes it a very strong physical attacker. It's just, it is a little bit frailer on the physical defensive side and isn't really fast, but it's also not slow, so it's hard to take advantage of Trick Room, and there's not really, outside of like Braviary, which really doesn't want to run it, there's no Tailwind on the team to really take advantage of Gallade's offensive prowess. And while Torkoal can spam Eruptions and Trick Room if DDF or Glade gets to set it off, I don't think that this team is going to be as consistent at setting Trick Room, outside of maybe having a DDF next to Glade to start off with, as some of the other Trick Room teams are. And so I think it's going to be hard to keep Torkoal from taking any damage before it tries to use Eruption, which I think causes it to be a little bit weaker, because there's no, like, Hisuian Lilligant or anything on this team to instantly boost it to be able to move like immediately and outspeed everything and hit powerful eruptions or anything. So I think it's a kind of a weird situation on this team. But again, I think Gallade is good. I think Salazzle's great. I think fast Encore, fake out, powerful sludge bombs, or maybe not like powerful, but like decently powerful sludge bombs and flamethrowers and stuff. I think it's just extremely good for the amount of points that it is, and I think that it can do some interesting things, and I'm excited to see it with Taunt even as well. So yeah, I think Braviary, primarily just a physical attacker. It happens to get Tailwind, and it happens to get U-turn. Everything gets Helping Hand, it feels like. But it just really struggles. Clodsire, it gets After You, it gets Water Absorb. It gets high horsepower and Gunk Shot and not too much else. There's some interesting things it can do. It's just a little bit weak. But again, pretty cheap Pokemon too. So overall, I think that this kind of is very anti-synergistic, even though there are parts of it that work really well together. I think that there are also parts of it, mostly looking at this one, that don't really mesh well together. And so I'm a little bit disappointed in kind of how some of this turned out, because I did feel like that Qianpao trade was good to trade it away. I just don't think that this was the thing to trade it to. But overall, I think it's all right. I would like to see maybe some trades in the future that shift away, either away from the rain, which would be not my suggestion, or away from this Torkoal sort of Torkoal mode, and spend your points elsewhere, because this is a very high point Pokemon, and you can do a lot for this team, and like building this core and expanding this expanding force and the rain kind of duo thing you got going on here. So I think if you can really push this to be the best that it can be, I think that the team becomes a lot stronger. And so I'd like to see some changes like that. But as always, I am very open to being surprised. And unfortunately, as a result, I think I'm going to have to put it kind of here. Again, kind of unordered, but yeah, I think I'm going to have to put it in C tier, just because even though I really like a lot of the Pokemon on there, and I think they can do neat things, I just don't think that most of them work well together. I think it's kind of like Chris's team, except its little core of 4 that really does work well together is not as strong. And so I do really want to be proven wrong by this, and I want to see if the double weather does work. I want to see how, because I'd be very excited to see that work out. But all in all, I just think it's a little bit weaker than a lot of the other teams in this league. I think the general power level is much higher this season than it was last season. 2 teams left. The Welsh Woobats. Love this guy. Content creator extraordinaire. Matt has, I think, drafted pretty well. I think that this team is better than his last team. I do like Whimsicott. I think it's Prankster Tailwind. I think it's Prankster Taunt. It gets some beat up stuff that is really good for Annihilate and Lucario. It gets Prankster Fake Tears. It gets Prankster Tickle, which is a pretty niche move that actually lowers the attack and defense of the opposing Pokemon by 1 stage, which is kind of neat. It's like reverse bulk up. So it can actually be used in tandem with kind of like Annihilate if you want to not only reduce the opponent Pokemon's damage output, but also make them weaker and more susceptible to your attacks. I think it gets, it gets Prankster Encore. Obviously, a lot of this team gets Encore, which is really neat to me. I'll be excited to see how he uses it. It gets Helping Hand, it gets Charm as well, so like -2 attack even. So there are multiple different ways that you can run Whimsicott. I think Whimsicott is the best draft Pokemon. I wanted it. Matt was able to draft first. He got third. I got near last, and I think it's very intelligent of him to have gone ahead and gone for it. And I think that Annihilate, the next Pokemon in line, is a perfect pairing for it, because I think it really does do very well not only with this Tailwind to potentially do some final Gambit stuff or do some Defiant stuff if you're facing Intimidate, but also just for that beat up strategy that I was talking about, that enables Annihilate to get like plus, I don't know, what like base 300 power Rage Fist or something. Or is it 250? I don't know. Whatever it is, a very strong Ghost type move, which not many Pokemon get. Like I was commenting earlier, is that Ghost wasn't really a common type. This is one of the few strong Ghost type attackers, and I think that Whimsicott and Annihilate pair very well together. Whether you run it as a bulky ape or a very fast and offensive ape, I think that Whimsicott can really help it in both regards, and I think that that's great. And I think that Ogerpon also does that for them. I think that having that redirection to allow Annihilate to use bulk up, or even, using Follow Me to support some of these other special attackers specifically, is very, very powerful, because it allows Matt's team to be a little bit frailer, which it is here. But it also has powerful offensive stuff off the bat, which is very nice, because I know that Ogerpon itself is also very strong as well, and so I think that having this sturdy ability to always be able to guarantee that you're not only redirecting one attack, but almost always, unless you're facing like Urshifu and you decide to Terrasilize in front of it for whatever reason, you're almost always going to be able to get 2 Follow Me's off, which is actually quite incredible. While also being able to Terrasilize and get very, very strong. Not only do you get the defense boost, which is actually very interesting on Ogerpon, because normally we see it with the special defensive boost in the Wellspring form, but also you get the rock type boost in general, and I think that it has one of the strongest physical rock type moves in the game. Only up there, only maybe beat out by like Mighty Cleave. So having that consistent rock type coverage, like I said, is very strong, because rock type is just such a strong type. And so overall, does the same thing as the other pawns. And it's just very good in general. Sandy Shocks, I'm a big fan of, especially with Fake Tears and Tailwind. If this thing doesn't outspeed you, it can use Booster Energy to get the speed boost, and then Whimsicott uses Fake Tears on you, and this thing starts nuking Pokemon. So I would be very afraid of this Pokemon, because it works very well with Whimsicott, and it works very, very well with Redirection, and it has amazing coverage. Like, Electric and Ground offensive typing is very strong. Ambipom, I was not a believer until I actually looked into what this thing gets. So it gets a lot of very niche support moves. It gets fast Fake Out. It can always kind of be run offensive if you do like I know back in Gen 4 it ran Fake Out and then Final Gambit, and those were its only 2 moves. And so I know that it can do things like that. It also gets Skill Link, so it means it hits 5 times with things like Tail Slap. Or it also gets Beat Up to help Annihilate or Lucario as well, if Whimsicott ends up going down. So it's very hard to stop this team if you don't have Follow Me or something from just getting set up with Annihilate and Lucario. So I think this team is very good at doing that. I know that Technician is also pretty strong with Fake Out and normal type Stab. It means its Fake Outs are actually going to be doing quite a bit of damage, which is something to consider. Pickup, I hope he never brings, because if he does, it's a very terrible accident, and I don't want to see that happen to him. But overall, I think Ambipom has some cool moves. Gets Taunt, Knockoff, Thunder Wave. It's fast. And so I think overall, it's good. I don't think it's great. I think there are better ways to spend your points than a normal type that's decently expensive. But I also think I see the vision and for what it does for this team as not only the sole Fake Out user, but also just in terms of beat up or being able to do certain use certain strategies with it. And it also gets flinged as another big one, so it can do some fling strategies with berries, just like I used in the finals thanks to Wings. The Wings showed me the fling stuff, and I was able to use it in grand finals to win. So I think fling strategies are very real. But I think that fling in general, like if your opponent has something to stop beat up, they're gonna have something to stop fling because it's basically just follow me. It's the same things. Uh, Heck, I wouldn't be. I would almost be tempted to challenge someone to bring like I don't know, like Terra Ghost with weakness policy on their follow me mon, and just get like a major boost from his own beat up. I think that'd be hilarious. So I'd be really excited to see that if that is the case. But you know, Delphox gets some pretty interesting things. It gets Howl. It gets Encore. It gets its its stats aren't bad. It's okay special attack. Its speed is actually faster than I thought it was. It's 104 base speed, which is faster than a lot of the league right now. Because like I said, it's a very slow season. Its defenses aren't awful. It's Fire Psychic. It gets Expanding Force now. Now that it's back as a TM. And Magician is interesting, kind of useless. Its abilities are pretty bad. But its typing isn't awful. It's Armourouge typing. And it gets some tricks like that I was saying, like Howl and things. Can also use Will-O-Wisp if you want to do like some supportive stuff. But really this is kind of just a fire and psychic special attacker. And while I don't think it's amazing, I think it is very, very potent if you're at -2 special defense, just like any of these other special attackers. Which is part of why I think Whimsicott is just so strong in draft, because it can make even, Pokemon that you wouldn't consider very strong to begin with, very threatening in certain situations. Lucario, like I was saying, it's mostly this beat up stuff. It's got Inner Focus to potentially ignore some fake out things, but for the most part, I mean, you're going to be running it as an offensive piece. And I don't think it's very strong outside of having, like maybe it can hit stuff if Whimsicott uses Fake Tears and it's got like 115 special attack. But I think its stabs aren't very strong because I think Flash Cannon and Aura Sphere are both base 80 power versus the usual kind of base 90 that you'd like to see. So I think it can kind of struggle. But I think it also gets things like Steel Beam with Lucario that could be cool. So like if you use Tailwind and then like Choice Spec Steel Beam or something, and then you just nuke something, I think I'd be hyped to see that. So I think it has options, and it can be run physically as well. So it's kind of the same thing as Iron Valiant. It's just a lower point mon, and so it tends to be weaker. But it gets the option for close combat as well, and things like maybe Iron Head. It gets some steel move. I don't know if it's Iron Head or what, but it gets some physical steel move. So it can be run physically or specially, and so I think that's strong. And I think that with Extreme Speed and Justified, you can start cleaning things up pretty quickly, which is why I like the fact that there are so many beat up mons on this team. Now these two. I like these two a lot. I like Hydreigon a lot. I think that Hydreigon is an underrated aspect of this team that means you don't necessarily have to run Tailwind on Whimsicott. Because you can run Tailwind on this bulky Pokemon just like you can on Jugulus, and it's going to be very good. Just because of the sheer lack of Fairy type attackers, and even when your team does have, like the opposing team does have a Fairy type attacker, you can Terastallize out of that weakness. I do think it's very strong. It's got amazing stats. It's not like, okay. Technically, it's not like amazing, but it is pretty bulky and it's pretty fast. It's not base 100, but it's faster than a lot of the stuff in this league still. It's like this entire team already is by default faster. So I'd be really surprised to see if it even needs Tailwind most weeks, or whether Whimsicott opts to go for just pure support for damage and damage mitigation and things like that, because it really can't afford to with how fast this team is on average. But Hydreigon just has such strong special attacks, the same special attack as Armourouge. I'm going to keep saying that because I saw that in chat and I was like, oh, that's funny. Because technically Duosion does too, but that doesn't mean it's good. But as a result, I think having those strong dark type attacks is, good. I think having the option for Draco Meteor off of such a strong attack or special attack is also very good, especially if you're hitting it into a -2 special defense Pokemon. I think suddenly this Pokemon picks up KOs left and right. And same thing with Clawitzer. I think Clawitzer with Mega Launcher is also one of those few very consistent water types, special attacking water types now, that because everything lost Scald, now has Water Pulse instead that's boosted by Mega Launcher that enables it to be a strong special attacker. And it is only slightly less than Armor Douche, but because it has such a middling speed, it actually can perform very well in Tailwind, because then after that, it's like, it's faster than Ogerpon in Tailwind. And so a lot of teams, their fastest Pokemon is Ogerpon or something close to it. And Clawitzer can outspeed that in Tailwind. And it can do big damage with Mega Launcher, whether it be Dragon Pulse or Dark Pulse or Sphere or Water Pulse. There's a whole bunch of different options that Clawitzer has. And so I think in general, it's a very strong special attacking Pokemon that's often overlooked in draft. So I think it's a very good steal for the points that it was. And so I can't wait to see that. But overall, I really like the cohesiveness that Whimsicott brings in general, and that a lot of this team has with the Follow Me to be able to support some of the frailer attackers that either need some debuffs from Whimsicott or buffs from its allies using Beat Up or something like that. And so, all in all, and I mean, as you can see, like everything on this team gets Helping Hand. So like you never know what could be helping boost the damage of another thing, and so it's kind of neat. So I really like the diversity on the squad, and I can see where everything fits in this team. So I think it's very cohesive. And so unlike some teams where like maybe they have some better Pokemon individually than this team does, I think that this team is very cohesive, and I think that it works very well together, even if some of the Pokemon like Ambipom might not, or Delphox even, or Lucario, might not generally be thought of as good. I think that they work well in the certain situations that they need to and help each other, whether it be through Beat Up or through Fake Out or through just some of this coverage and ability to hit things on multiple different, physical or special ends or whatever. And so I think that all in all, that the Welsh Woobats are a very strong team this season. And I think that they are another A-tier pick. And the final squad that we have to look at is this one. Or actually, Welsh Woobats. Let's go back. This is pretty weak to fighting. Whimsicott's not. Annihilape's immune. Delphox hits them hard. So I'm not super concerned about the fighting weakness on this team. Ice, I actually might be concerned about the ice weakness. If any team had an ice type, I don't think we've seen a single ice type like this entire time. Or Avila Kasui is one of them. And then yeah, so genuinely, the only ice type in the league is Avila Kasui. So the Welsh Woobats having that weakness to ice is no big deal. The ground weakness, again, Levitate on Hydreigon makes it incredibly threatening, and Whimsicott being able to resist it in the first place is nice. But overall, I think Ogerpon can handle it pretty well, and Clawitzer threatens a lot of the ground types that exist right now anyways, and there's not too many strong ground types right now. Like, Garchomp doesn't want to be in front of Whimsicott, and it doesn't want to be taking hits from Hydreigon. Landorus doesn't want to be taking hits from Clawitzer, especially if Clawitzer's in Tailwind. And anything else that's just pure. Like, if you have Clodsire for whatever reason, you don't want it to be hit by Delphox. You don't want it to be hit by Sandy Shocks. So really the ground types that are in the league right now aren't super threatening into this team, because they kind of can't deal with the major pieces that counter those ground types. And this fairy type, again, not very common. Only 2 Pokemon are weak to it. The rest are pretty neutral. And so I'm not concerned about it. Because, like, if you look for Sylveon, having just physical attackers in general, like, an Iron Head from Lucario is going to kill Sylveon. Like, it's very hard to get Sylveon to be able to take hits on the physical end, much less if it gets, tickled by Whimsicott or something. Or if, Lucario is now plus 4, 3 times attack or whatever. And so I don't think it's a very big deal, especially considering it's only, like, one Pokemon difference. Flying, I'm a little concerned about, but again, there's not many flying types either. So a lot of the major weaknesses on this team, like the ice, the ground, the flying, and the fairy, are just not common in the league. And so that's part of why they're in the A tier, is just because everything is so cohesive and they have so many different ways to be able to boost their own Pokemon and stats. and that the types that they do happen to be weak to are just incredibly uncommon right now. And so I think even though it does have some weaknesses here, I think that it handles them a lot better just because they're in all the right places. Like nobody having an ice type except for Avila Hisui is so good for this team. I just don't know how that happens, but yeah. So that's why even though some teams got like put lower and put B tier for a lot of their major type weaknesses, that's why this one's kind of above that. And so yeah. So anyways, back to the Alaskan Articunos. I personally don't like this team. I'm going to come out and say it. I think that for the past 2 seasons, I have consistently thought that Tommy has some of the best teams every time. I put them as like my number 1 last season for team, even before the trades that did make them better. And I hope that this team goes through the same sort of trades to make it better this time. I think there is a little bit of value. I know that people were hype about Slitherwing. What on earth? 11 fourths weakness? I'm not going to ask too many questions. Anyways, yeah, I think that this team is just not as strong as the other ones because I don't see how it works well together. I understand that Gouging Fire is good. I understand that, oh yeah, you can boost Palafin with it, right? To give it monstrous attack. But Palafin needs to switch out in order to do what it wants to. So if you're using Howl beforehand, you're nerfing yourself by wasting a turn with Gouging Fire and then having to switch Palafin out anyways. So if you're trying to boost your attack just for 1 turn on Palafin, then you have to boost it again the next time Palafin comes back in. So you're actually wasting twice as many turns to get Palafin up to like the same stat boost if you don't have Palafin out already. And you don't want to be leading Palafin every time because then you become predictable. And if you have Tornadus and Palafin, which does work with, I guess, like a mini rain mode, maybe with Dryskin Toxicroak, I don't think it works very well, because if you have Palafin in rain, yes, Palafin becomes stronger, but then Gouging Fire becomes weaker. So now one of your major, like, not only offensive pieces, but one of your most expensive point pieces is basically neutralized in terms of its fire attacks, which is not good, because you really want it to be able to hit the things that threaten Palafin. And if you opt to use, which even though rain, I guess, makes Hisui and Gudra technically a little less susceptible to fire damage, it's already neutral. And so and Bisharp as well, but like, I don't see the power of rain here. But on the other end of the stick, I don't see the power of Sun either. Because if you're using Sun, then all of a sudden your Palafin is doing nothing. And if your Palafin is doing nothing, you're again wasting a ton of points on a Pokemon that could be doing something better. Or like, I don't know, literally any other Pokemon that is worth that amount of points. Like a King Gambit or something. Like I think Bisharp, like changing Bisharp for King Gambit and then putting Palafin away for a bit and saying, okay, yeah, because I don't think Palafin I just don't think it works well with Gouging Fire if you're trying to use Weather with Tornadus. So really, I think the biggest issue with this team is that none of it goes well together. I think these are all very strong Pokemon. I think Tornadus is amazing support. It has wonderful Tailwind and Weather and Taunt and stuff with Prankster. And it has some good flying type attacks. But it really doesn't benefit much of the team. Because you're not using the Weather. You're not making use of it. And a lot of the Pokemon like Palafin and Gouging Fire are already naturally faster than a whole bunch of the league. And the only things that would get faster and like fast enough to really matter are Gudra Hisui and like Slitherwing and maybe a Bisharp. Because really everything else just isn't strong enough to really make good use of being able to go faster. And so I really don't understand how this team is supposed to do any sort of offense or just not get willed down by everything that comes its way. And while I get that Gouging Fire individually is extraordinarily good, and on any physical team, it can be an absolute monster because it keeps giving Howl to everyone, like Howl Boost to everyone. It just, like, you don't want to be really giving Howl to Gudra, and you can't really give it to Palafin very well without switching it because of the 0 to hero ability. You don't want to be giving it to Tornadus, so you really, all of your high value point mons, none of them make use of Howl. And then of your low value mons, Bisharp makes okay use of it, but it's really not fast enough or bulky enough without Eviolite to want to do much with it. So it doesn't have the freedom to run black glasses like King Gambit does, or Assault Vest, I mean, granted, it can run Eevee Light, but it just doesn't have the ability to do the same things that King Gambit does. Um, and you're investing a lot of stuff into that lower tier Pokemon now. And Toxicroak as well, it's just not strong enough to really make use of Howl and be able to do things. Like, it doesn't get a consistent poison type move that isn't Poison Jab, which again is an 80 base power move. So like, there are some types that just don't have good physical or special or vice versa coverage moves. Like, and so I think Poison was one of those that just doesn't have a consistent, strong physical attack, because you're either running Gunk Shot and missing, which, okay, to be fair, this is Tommy. He will never miss his Gunk Shots. That really just, I don't think it's very strong in the sense that I don't think that it can take advantage of the boost very well. I think the Slitherwing is already so strong, and I think that it already gets a boost to its attack anyways if you're using, like, booster energy or something. And sure, you're going to be using First Impression. First Impression is one of its best moves. It's one of the most impactful things it can do. But it has to be on the first turn, and it has priority, which means you can't even boost it with Howl. So I don't understand the Slitherwing either. So really, I don't know what Gouging Fire is doing on this team. If you want to run Rain, okay, run Rain. But Gouging Fire does nothing for this team. Like, yeah, it boosts the attack. Okay, attack of what? Like Baby Palafin? You're going to boost the 70 base attack that it has? I don't see it. I don't understand it. Like, you really have to be able to pivot and stuff and really get Palafin in and out really quickly so that Gouging Fire can continue to attack it, or to boost it with Howl, but you can't really do that if you want to bring Tornadus. And if you bring Tornadus, you don't offer any immediate pressure with it, with any of your Pokemon, because your Pokemon just aren't that strong. And so I really don't understand how this team is expected to function. And so even though I do think that Tommy has consistently had some of the best teams in previous seasons, I don't think that the 4 Pokemon, because this is unironically more like a team that Chris has, except instead of all of the 4 Pokemon being able to be brought every game and working really well together and just expecting the opponent to find a solution, I can't even find a solution for how to make these 4 really expensive Pokemon work together in the first place. And so really, I think this team is a little bit of a mess of just really strong Pokemon individually. I think they're all great. And I think the type charts, down here is pretty okay. I don't know why every team is weak to ground and fairy, but they just are. I can't wait for the day that they release a ground and Fairymon, because it will go first round draft every single time. But yeah, I don't get this team. And the only fake out being Toxicroak just is the cherry on top. Because like I started the draft with, I mean, you really want your fake out wand to be something that you can bring every match, and you don't want to bring Toxicroak every match. And it's just not good enough. So even though these 4 are really strong individually, none of them work well together, except for maybe like Goodra next to Palafin, or Gouging and Palafin I'm not a believer in. But I do want to be proved wrong, and I do want to see Tommy do well, because he got greedy with the Palafin last time and clicked Drain Punch and Rotom, and I feel bad. I think he deserved to win that match, and I want to see him do well. But I don't think this team is it, because this team has overall like very, very similar stats to this, but then it just doesn't have the same consistency and cohesiveness. And here, this is a little bit weaker, but the whole team has a general trend for how it wants to play. This team, same thing, general trend. This team, strong 4, but they work well together. We don't talk about this team. This team as well, even though the Pokemon are weaker, they generally all want to do the same thing, just stay alive. This team is very cohesive around the rain and around the generally good typing coverage that it has. This team even has, well-defined modes that do work well together. So like I was saying, like, these 4 work well together. Even if Torkoal doesn't make sense, even if the latter half of this doesn't make sense to me, then these 4 alone are just so strong and have such a solid, like, mode that I can understand bringing them. But I don't see that here. And I want to be proven wrong, but I just don't get it. And so, while Azelf is really funny and Furret is cool because it got Follow Me, I don't know if it had Follow Me before or what, even gets frisked, I think Furret's cool for, like, I don't know, dirt cheap. Um, and I think Azelf can do funny explosion things. But just overall, I don't see it. And so I would, please do explain this team to me. Whether it be after you play me or what, but this team, I just don't see the vision. And so for that reason, unfortunately, I do think that that's the weakest team in the league. And so yeah, I am pretty comfortable with that final tier list. Again, tiers are unordered, and I want you to prove me wrong. I do hope that you are able to show me something that I don't know. I want to learn more about the game. I want to learn more about you all, how you play. But all in all, I think that this is kind of where I stand as far as first opinions. I wish you all luck, and I appreciate you all being here, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of the season.